So, what happens when this grand universal protocol for enlightenment suddenly has to debug something as messy and human as a hero's grief? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to dive into. It's a story that links this huge cosmic law to a really personal moment of loss. And it all comes down to the endgame of the ego.
Okay, so picture this. The universe is saved. Huge win, right? But for one of its heroes, it's a total loss. While trillions breathe a sigh of relief, Peter Parker is just completely adrift. And it's in that quiet, that deafening silence after the big battle, where our real story kicks off. Not with a bang, but with the crushing weight of a loss that feels absolutely impossible to bear.
All right, before we jump into that, let's do a super quick recap of the protocol itself, right? Think of it as a previously on. In Chapter 1, we had this prince, Siddhartha, who leaves his perfect little digital world. He finds this amazing balance called the middle way. And, well, he basically reboots his entire consciousness to become the Buddha. He beats the bad guy, the Lord of Illusion, and then uploads himself into the universe. Yeah, he literally becomes a fundamental law of physics, like a cosmic operating system. So now let's see what happens when this massive, universe-spanning protocol runs into a very, very human bug in the system: grief. We're zooming all the way in from the cosmic scale right down to one kid just trying to process a loss that is way too big. And here's our scene. We're at Tony Stark's cabin. The world is out there celebrating, but Peter Parker, he's completely shut down. It's not his spider sense warning him about some physical threat. No, this is different. It's screaming with this deep existential dread. He's just paralyzed by the ghost of his mentor. And this is the thought that's just looping in his head over and over. It's the source code of his pain. He's been handed the keys to the kingdom, this incredible legacy, but he feels absolutely crushed by the expectation. He thinks he has to become the man who just sacrificed everything. And that's a weight, well, it's a weight he just doesn't think he can ever lift. You know, there's actually a word for this feeling. It's an ancient one, dukkha. Now, you'll often hear it translated as just suffering, but it's so much more than that. It's that specific kind of stress, that deep dissatisfaction you get from clinging onto something that was never meant to last. It's the pain of wanting a reality that, well, it's just not there anymore. And that's exactly where Peter is. So how do you debug a system that's caught in a grief loop like this? Well, you send in a technician, and a pretty unexpected one arrives to diagnose the problem right at its source. Emerging out of a quantum lotus right there on the lake, the Buddha appears. And he doesn't offer easy platitudes or a pat on the back. He offers a diagnosis. He tells Peter, look, the problem isn't that Tony is gone. The problem is that you are desperately clinging to a form, an idea, an image, an expectation that was never permanent to begin with. The Buddha then breaks it down. He explains that Tony Stark wasn't one solid thing. He was more like a temporary collection of these 5 elements, the skandhas. You have his physical form, his feelings and sensations, how he perceived the world, his thoughts and ambitions, and his consciousness. All of these things were always changing, always in motion. The hero Peter is holding on to was a lot more like a river than a statue. And this leads to this absolutely crucial idea, anatta, or non-self. The Buddha explains that Tony's final, ultimate act wasn't just about dying physically. It was the ultimate letting go of the ego. In that single snap, he achieved pure anatta. He dissolved the temporary collection called Tony Stark for the good of everyone. And here's the kicker, the paradox at the very heart of Peter's pain. By trying so hard to become the next Iron Man, by holding on so tightly to his mentor's ghost and the weight of that legacy, Peter is actually working against Tony's final sacrifice. He's trying to rebuild the very ego that Tony let go of to save the universe. Okay, so this brings us to the climax of the whole lesson. To break this painful cycle, Peter doesn't need a new suit or more power. What he needs is a completely new way of seeing things, a fundamental change in perspective. The Buddha points to the EDITH glasses. You know, the tech Tony left him, the very symbol of his legacy. But he tells Peter to use them differently, not as a weapon system, but as a tool for insight, to turn on a whole different kind of vision. So Peter puts on the glasses and everything shifts. On one side, you have what he used to see, that crushing phrase, even dead, I'm the hero, just this massive weight. But now he sees something totally different. Instead of a burden, he sees these glowing threads, karma threads, stretching out from Tony's sacrifice, millions of them, Each one is a life, a future, that's now possible because Tony let go. He realizes the legacy wasn't a heavy crown he was supposed to wear. It was a garden he was meant to help grow. And in that one moment, it all just clicks. The buzzing in his head, the anxiety, it just stops. The weight is gone. The realization is so simple, but it's completely world-changing for him. His job was never to fill his hero's shoes. It was to finally, confidently walk in his own. He just needed to be Peter Parker. This acceptance is everything. It's Peter's transformation. He goes from being trapped by the past, crushed by it, to being totally free in the present. He finally finds his own way forward. As the Buddha begins to fade back into the quantum realm, he leaves Peter with one last piece of wisdom. And it's a direct callback to what we learned in Chapter 1. He says, "Don't mourn the setting sun. Be the light that shines now that it's gone. Walk the middle way. It's not about being a shadow of the past. It's about being the light for right now." So, what do we take away from all this? Well, first, that so much of our suffering, our dukkha, comes from being attached to things that are by their very nature temporary, and that the self, the ego we spend so much time building, isn't some permanent statue. It's always changing. True freedom, then, isn't about meeting expectations. It's about letting them go. And maybe the most important lesson of all, we don't have to carry the weight of the heroes who came before us. Our job is to be the light that the future needs. And that brings us to a final question, one that's a little more personal for all of us. I mean, we all have expectations put on us, right? From family, from friends, from ourselves. But if you could really, truly let go of the person you think you're supposed to be, who would actually be left?